Welcome to Be To Better, the podcast where we unravel the secrets of successful entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Iolanthe Gabrie.
And I'm your host, James Shadrach. Join us as we dive into the art of developing a brand presence, engaging with self-reflection for business growth, and navigating the world of networking.
We'll discuss the ethics of cold outreach, the power of thought leadership, and why luck has no place in business.
Stay tuned for valuable insights on creating a niche, building a core network, and the impact of automation on authentic communication.
This is Be To Better, where entrepreneurs come to level up their game.
Let's dive in and unlock the secrets to your entrepreneurial success. Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about brand presence and how this is something that doesn't really just happen, and there's a lot of intentional effort that goes behind it. So Iolanthe, let's have a chat about brand presence.
I am such a zealot when it comes to designing brands.
I know, you're great at it.
Because I feel like a lot of people have a sense that brands just spring from the ether fully formed, but there is a really intentional process behind it. And I think one of the reasons why we both wanted to share our knowledge on this subject with our audience is because none of the steps are brain surgery. They're just steps that need to be taken in good time. So, James, could you identify some of the elements that you think contribute to a legitimate brand?
Yeah, so my thoughts on brand are it's so much, and this is just my thoughts, that it's so much revolved around that person who's running the business. So it's the leader, it's the entrepreneur at the front, and I think it's a representation of their values. So when you walk into an organization or you interface with a service provider, I think part of that brand is what they value, how they see the world, how they want their business to be. And then all these visual elements that we have and all these creative pieces, I think that comes from that foundation of figuring out this is who I am, this is what I believe in, and this is essentially what I stand for.
I think it can be really hard to effectively build a cogent brand, one that feels the same on every platform a customer experiences it on, if that leadership piece isn't in place. Now, when we're talking about the approach of developing an understanding of self as a sole trader, as we mature as business owners, that naturally develops.
Yep.
But there is a rigor around self-inquiry that will then allow you to go, okay, this brand feels like me. So when you're presented with either work opportunities that don't fit in your wheelhouse, or perhaps branding suggestions from people who don't know your brand or your values, you can reject those notions with a bit of confidence. So when it comes to educating my clients about the elements of a legitimate brand, I always start with logo. So logo design can be done in a way that is cost effective.
Yes.
I imagine that some of the audience we're speaking to are at really startup phases, while some will be in much more mature stages. But logo design needs to be considered. Now, I'm not saying you can't go on Fiverr and go to an inexpensive logo that isn't effective. You can, but the elements of the logo need to be such that they can be replicated effectively on a range of media. Things like fonts in a logo that have tons of serifs. Serifs are the little, the little tiny comma or artwork around a letter. They make it hard to replicate our logo effectively. Logos that have too much fine line work also make it really difficult. And so do logos that have colour gradients. Logos with colour gradients, they do my head in. It's just so hard for you to replicate effectively.
Yeah. And I think a really important point is when you're designing that logo, think about every media opportunity that you ever have, you're going to have to send through that logo.
Yes.
And a lot of the time they're going to need a transparent version, they're going to need a fully black or a fully white version. So if your logo is really complicated or it has those gradients, how are you going to do that? We face it all the time in video editing where it's just like, I just need a simple version of this logo.
Yes.
And oftentimes we can't find it.
Yeah. So when you're working with your graphic designer, make sure upon brief that you know what they're going to be delivering to you. Now, you don't necessarily need your brand book if you have a good sense of how you're going to use a logo, but you will need that logo in a .jpg, .png, which is the transparent background. You're going to need some various applications for it, because you'd be surprised. Well, no, you wouldn't be, because you work in a similar industry to me, but the amount of clients who'll come to either James or myself with logos that they're just not full logo kits, but they may have paid quite a lot for them.
Yeah.
Just a word to the wise.
Yeah. So I think essentially it's that little brand mark piece that you have. So whether it's like ours is a little play button, and that's sort of our logo brand mark. And yeah, I think that's the core piece that you would want from the logo. And then I think all the other add-ons are like, well, what's your brand font? What's your color scheme? And all those different bits and pieces. Would you say people who are starting out, do they need all that stuff, or is it important just to get that first initial logo?
I think that the logo is the most important thing. If you have budget for additional motifs like your beautiful play brand mark, wonderful. But the most important thing is the logo, because without a logo that feels legitimate, i.e. easily replicable, the sense of it being totally unique isn't as necessary as it being repeated in concert with your identity. That's the important part about building that legitimacy. So with clients, we love them to start with a quality logo, or as quality as they can get, and then spend their next amount of budget on photography. James, cool. Why is photography so important?
Yeah, I think I think photos are great. Like, I think part of it is we feel good when we have new photos. And when someone's launching a new brand, a key piece that you always see is new photography. And it's like it's the start of something new when they do that photography. But I think the more sort of psychological part of it is that when someone sees a really high quality, like stylish image that someone's put some thought behind, you automatically value that person as higher quality.
Yes.
If you hop onto a website, or you're looking for, like, even like a restaurant or a cafe, if you hop on their Google Maps and they have really bad quality phone photos, you get a certain perception, like, oh, maybe they're not as professional, they're just sort of starting out. But if you see really high quality stuff, you just feel, oh, this is a person of quality. This is a high value sort of person or organization.
I find that a lot of business owners that I might work with, either when I'm mentoring or who come through Ruby Assembly initially as clients, they'll be confused about why they're not getting cut through with audiences, or they can't raise their fees, despite the fact they may be quite senior in their role. And then I have a look at their website, and I have a look at their assets, and you know, their assets might be 15 years old. So it's obvious that the brand is not in conversation with what contemporary brand legitimacy looks like. And as consumers, as James just really eloquently illustrated, as consumers, we know when something doesn't look expensive. And if you are purporting to be a premium service, and for the purposes of B2 Better, we are really focused on professional services mostly, who are not about discounting, they're about building value into their position as leaders and experts. Looking appropriately bulletproof and professional is where the game is at. You can do so much with that photo piece. And then, of course, videography. How does videography extend past photography, James?
I'll go into that, but I just wanted to say on that point as well, I think it's the exact same thing as rocking up to a client meeting in a really sharp suit, or having your makeup and hair and whatever you want like totally on point and feeling confident in yourself. It's the same thing online. And I think sometimes service providers don't realize that in the same way they rock up to a meeting in their best clothes, having high quality photos and images is the exact same thing, but just in a digital sense. So when people are rocking up to your website, how are you presenting? And it's really, really bad. Like, I don't want to go into it too much, but it's really not a great look if those images aren't high quality.
And I really love that you interjected there, because I have a good example of how presenting in a bulletproof, professional way protects price. So when clients come to my agency, I've been in practice 14 years now, so when you Google Iolanthe Gabrie or Ruby Assembly, the sheer volume of content that is very high quality assaults you, right? And that's by design. I've invested in that, right? That's conscious. And it means that the conversations that I have with clients are very rarely about price. By the time they've been exposed to me and they make a decision that it's time to call Iolanthe or my colleagues, they have been exposed to my brand over a long period of time, and they'll have an understanding that we're not going to be, you know, the cheapest option, but equally we're probably not going to be so expensive that, you know, that they cannot even dream about using us. So the conversations are about the actual way we can work together, the value we're going to add to their identity, rather than getting mired down in talking about cost, which I'm not particularly interested in.
I think that's such a great point. I think as you're producing all that content, you're building a story in the minds of potential clients and customers. So even though, like, from your perspective, you know exactly what you're posting, exactly what's happening in your world, but from their perspective, they're just getting little bits and pieces of information. Oh, wow, Yolanthe's doing this, she's doing that, she started a co-working space, she's written a book, she's speaking, she's doing all these things. And even though that outside person might not know you directly, they're like, whoa, like, she's doing a lot. Like, the perception of you grows in that person's mind as someone who's really powerful, who's doing a lot of stuff, and they feel like, wow, this is a really high value person. I don't feel comfortable arguing about price with them. Like, they obviously have the quality. Look at all the stuff that they're doing.
Yeah, and I feel that let's talk briefly about a space that's really exploding, that a lot of people are attempting to enter at the moment, which is the coaching space. Via Instagram a lot of the time. Because we can now purchase, templates and suites of material that can make us quite swiftly look like we share the same visual language as an expert. I think that people conflate looking expert with being expert. Our point throughout Be to Better is definitely not to say that investing in good materials to build legitimacy is the core of good business. The core of good business is actually being able to deliver what you say you will. James and I are very much about the promise.
100%.
We really, really deliver on our promise.
And it's like if you sell a whole bunch of stuff through your marketing efforts, great, but then you really have to consider, well, if I can't deliver on this stuff, that's going to be a really big problem. And in the moment, it feels fun. Like, I'm going to do all this marketing stuff and get my brand out there, blah, blah, blah. But then if you really just sort of think through, okay, if this goes exceptionally well and I get 100 new clients or whatever it is over the next couple of months, what's my capacity to deliver on that? Because if I can't deliver on that, then I'm losing all the potential referral opportunities from those new clients. And if I don't do a really good job, then those potential clients might not say great things about me, or they might not just spread it as much as I want. So I agree. It's sort of like that balance. Like, yes, we want to push and market, but you also have to think, well, do I have the capacity to fulfill?
Yeah. And that's why it should actually be a comfort to the audience who are just thinking about beginning to invest in branding legitimacy, because you don't need to do everything at once. Neither James nor I did everything at once when building our brands. It's really cumulative. It's a crescendo
100%.
Of investment. So start with logo, go to photography. They give you the core of being able to build a good website. James, would you be able to speak about what you think a good website looks like that makes people feel like, wow, that is somebody that I want to work with, and what a less good website looks like?
Are you talking about website or video or both?
I think that both, because they're in conversation.
Totally. So I think for website, I really view that as a landing page or the front door of coming into an organization. So I think it's interesting because if you are just starting out, the easiest way to do these things for a website would be using something like Wix or Squarespace, and you can pretty quickly get something up and running. But then as you progress, you really do want to look at how can I invest a little bit more on that and make sure it's looking great. But I think if anything, it's like walking into the front door of an organization. So just having things looking clean, looking professional, and then having video content. So a big part for us is having a key piece of video content right on the website. And our whole thing is, how can we share this person's vision and values in a really short and engaging piece? So when people do land there, they can say, wow, I actually relate to this person and I want to work with that person. That's sort of how I think about it.
Look, I agree. I'd like you to briefly talk about the resistance that people have to documenting themselves. I know that it's difficult with photography if people haven't gone there, but videography seems to present an even bigger barrier. Can you talk a little bit about maybe why that is and how to overcome it?
I think the biggest thing is that it's similar to public speaking. And public speaking is one of the most common fears that we all have, of being in front of an audience and talking. So I think that's sort of the heart of it. And then I just think it comes down to, well, am I going to be judged if I put myself out there? And I think that's what shuts everyone down from producing content, for even just documenting and putting their face out there. And it's tricky because I think if you are starting a business, you have to figure that out in your own mind, that I do have to put myself out there and I might get judged and I might not have everybody agree with me, or want to work with me. But if you don't do that, then you're missing out on every single opportunity for the people who do want to work with you.
And when clients want to work with us, it's not because we are the only purveyor of the service. We're not the only psychologist. We're not the only family lawyer. We're not the only accountant. What they're wanting to do is work with somebody they feel connected to.
Yeah, totally.
And when you can't reveal who you are, you're actually you're stealing the opportunity for your clients to form a healthy connection with you.
Yep.
And it's a disservice to everybody. I've got an example of bold personal branding that I think that for a lot of people would be a giant leap of faith, but one that has been incredibly useful for Ruby Assembly.
Yep.
So you know those posters that people put on the side of hoardings that advertise Beyonce's coming to town or, you know, the Melbourne Food Festival?
Yeah.
Every year I have rock posters distributed across Melbourne that have Ruby Assembly branding and my face on them.
Amazing.
Now, it's great for two reasons. One is it's cost effective as an activity.
Yeah.
But two is that nobody else does that in my category. And I've had clients say, yeah, well, what's the ROI on that, Iolanthe? And James and I are going to delve into what you can expect from your brand and ROI very shortly. The principal benefit that I feel from that activity, it's incredibly bolstering for me as a person. I feel really proud of my brand, and I know that I have something to offer the community. So that's one aspect of it. But the other is when I start to see people take screenshots on their phones of images of Ruby Assembly around the city, it makes my clients feel really good about their association with us. They're like, we're part of that.
Amazing.
And Yolanthe's telling me that I should do that for me. And look how well it's working out for them. And that's a bold step. So it's also a way of giving other people the confidence to represent themselves in a public space. So that's a really big, that's a bold thing that not many people would want to do because they might be afraid that somebody could draw a doodle on their face or something. But the cost-benefit analysis, it's so worth doing. James, when we're spending money on our brand through videography, social media, whatever it might be, is it fair to try and balance your expenditure with a kind of ROI?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think anything in business, you do have to be looking at that ROI. And I like how you've sort of contextualized it as there are different stages and you're not sort of jumping into everything all at once and spending all that money. It's like as you grow, every level you're sort of slowly spending stuff on and sort of leveling up as you go. I think for me personally, like with so much of the video content that I produce, I say it like this, I produce about one video per week and I push that out across all platforms, so LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, as much as I can. And in general, once a month, I'll get one warm inbound inquiry from that. And for my business and for the amount of effort that I put into that, it's huge. Like it's a huge, huge ROI. And that's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to go viral on every single post or everything I push out there. I'm just trying to land a couple more clients through that. And that has a huge impact on the business.
Yeah, I think that moderate expectation in terms of ROI, and all business people look at the metrics of ROI quite differently.
Yeah.
But when it comes to likewise our prospecting processes within Ruby Assembly, I know that I need to be doing cold outreach, and don't worry, we're going to be dedicating a full episode. It will be juicy around our prospecting processes because both James' methodology and mine, they both work. But when I'm engaging in prospecting, I know a little like the metric that you said, you do the 4 videos, you get one warm lead. I know that if I'm doing that cold outreach now, in 3 months, there'll be something warm that comes from it. And if I neglect to do that work today, I cannot reasonably expect that in, say, September, somebody will be coming through the door.
100%.
And again, as part of B2 Better, we're going to explore the importance of prospecting hygiene in terms of business development, because a lot of entrepreneurs, we get caught up in the doing. But we have to doing of the function of the business rather than the actual growing of the business. So, James, what was the first thing that you remember spending money on in your business?
Probably the logo. It's probably the logo.
And did you have someone design it professionally, or did you go? Yeah.
Yep. So in the very first business that I started, because before I had Purpose Productions, I had Video Y, and that was something I just made by myself. I just mucked around with tools on the internet.
Yes.
But it's like you said, like as I progressed further and further, I got to the point where I'm like, well, now I do have budget to actually pay someone and engage them to create something.
Yeah.
And you can feel the difference, because the thing that I could just create by myself, when I actually got someone to do it professionally, it was, night and day difference.
Yeah. The first thing that I spent money on Ruby Assembly was also logo, but I bought it at the same time as I bought website and business cards.
Yeah.
It was a package.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had never been in independent business before. I had, prior to being in marketing, I was an estate agent and an auctioneer. So there's a lot of guerrilla marketing involved in that kind of work.
Yeah.
But I understood the value of brand. And even though I had very little money, I was convinced that I needed to be able to show a business card and a website, and that the brand needed to feel considered. And it's changed twice since then, the brand. But, it's that leveling up, it's that maturation of brand. And, when I first began Ruby Assembly, it was known as Ruby Slipper, and the whole theme of the brand was quite magical, quite naive, very sweet.
Cool.
And when we changed to Ruby Assembly, not only did we change our name, but, if you're watching a video from it, you'll be able to see that the logo is very stark and quite plain. And actually within the next 6 months, we're going to be rebranding again.
Amazing.
That will be the third iteration of Ruby Assembly, and again, we can expect something kind of different as we've grown. So that should be comforting to people listening, that, we don't expect you to do everything at once, but we do expect you to do something.
Yes. So what do you think you could have invested in earlier? Like, looking back, out of everything you've done, what was something you wish you would have invested in earlier?
It is related to brand, but not explicitly. I would have invested in accounting earlier.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I first began Ruby Assembly, as I said, I'd never been in business before. For the first 18 months, I was sending invoices that did not have identification numbers on.
Right. Yep.
I didn't realise that I needed to.
Yep.
I was just sending the invoice with the date. Now, were the invoices paid? Yes. Were they sometimes confused at the client's end? Yes.
Yep.
But it wasn't until someone pointed out to me that was something I needed to do. And that was because I engaged a proper accountant. I did have a junior burger accountant that was both assuming too much of my knowledge about business and also providing advice that didn't match where I was at in terms of growth. And it left me with a really big tax debt, actually, which was a good lesson. And so then I began using business consultant accountants that really do more than compliance, and it just changed my understanding of cash flow in my business. They took me from sole trader to company. I became an employer
Amazing.
safely with them. I built family trusts. All the things. I would have preferred not to have had that tax debt and have started spending money on accounting earlier.
No, I love that. I went through a very similar thing for my first year in business, where I didn't have a great accounting setup, had a massive amount of tax that I needed to pay, and it was super, super stressful. So I totally agree. It's a big point.
So would that have been the first thing you'd have invested in as well earlier, or something else?
Good question. First thing I would have invested in, it's a really good one. I think doing some type of fundamental learning or coaching or course would be really helpful. If I was to invest in something differently, it would not be so much the motivation that I would need. It'd be more so the basics, like you're talking about. It's not as fun or as exciting. Like, even from a coaching perspective, if you have one coach who's saying, I'm going to, teach you everything, and it's going to be super motivating, and let's go. That feels fun, versus I'm going to teach you everything about business structure, cash flow management, how to plan your weeks and days, really boring sort of technical stuff. But it's so, so important. I wish I would have done that earlier.
Yeah, because it makes you feel safe, and it's only when you have an understanding of what's coming into the business and what works in terms of growing a business that you can go, okay, I will spend $5,000 on presenting at a particular event. It's only by understanding the way that it functions that you can really grow. So whilst it's not strictly branding related, it is definitely something that you address at the beginning of growing a brand.
Are there any brands that you're really excited about or really into at the moment? Anything you're like, wow, this is, amazing?
So actually just this morning I was scrolling on my phone when I woke up, And I saw a brand whose user experience and customer journey was utterly outstanding. I shared it with all my colleagues this morning. It's a dog food brand called Scratch.
Cool.
And the demographic picked me right in terms of the fact that I do have pets, so I've got a dog. And the website was designed in such a way that it refused to give you pricing until you had exchanged your email address, right? And if you're driven too quickly to exchanging an email address when you're going through user experience, you won't do it. You'll feel like this is too much too soon. It's like going into a bar and having a guy like try and pass you before, you know, having a conversation with you about Descartes. Which, you know, it's like, it's too much, man. But this journey asked me questions about my animal, asked me to name the animal. Like there was a little like motif of different dogs I could choose on my customer journey. So I was engaged as a customer throughout that design. It was fun. So there's an element of play in it. And then I did exchange my information to work out what the pricing would be.
There you go.
And then I've already had 2 follow-ups that feel appropriate, and that's only within the past 6 hours. So this is an example of an incredibly considered user experience for e-commerce, and I haven't experienced something that feels so convincing in terms of e-commerce for a really long time.
Love it.
So I'd check that out.
Yeah, that's cool.
But there's also one other person who my business came across recently, and they're a lawyer up in Queensland. I'll include the details of the person in the show notes. But their website was about the concept of kintsugi. So kintsugi is when you break something like a bowl, but then you mend it with gold and it becomes a more beautiful object for the mending. This was a lawyer that focused on deceased estates. So I love how the visual language of the site married healing and beauty to something as difficult as deceased estates. And I thought that was very elegant.
I love that. That's beautiful.
How about you?
I really enjoyed a brand lately called Dimple, and Dimple do contacts for contact lenses. So it's really interesting how they've done it, and they've got some creative branding because contact lenses are really boring. Like no one's like, wow, contact lenses. But what they've done is first off, they've created a subscription service. So you just log into the subscription and then every month contacts show up at your door, which is amazing. But they also have some really nice branding behind it. So it's this colourful, like blue, green, and orange sort of motif, and it's all circular patterns because it's eyes. But then what they've done really well is that's the big branding that you see on the website. And on the individual packets of lenses, they colour code them for different eyes. So I'm slightly different in my left eye than I am my right. So every left eye is a different branding colour than the right. So I can just pick them up and be like, oh, those are definitely the different ones, and I never get confused.
That's so clever.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's designed for function.
And
it's obviously delightful every time you look at it because it's like, oh, that's so clever. I love it.
Yeah, it's cool. So I highly recommend that, Dimple contact lenses.
Yeah, well, will it also include the information about Dimple and Scratch in today's show notes? I think we can probably wrap up our first Be to Better here. James, I've really enjoyed this. How about you?
Yeah, this was great. So good to chat with you.
Absolutely. So stay tuned. There'll be another Be to Better coming quite soon to everywhere you find your podcast, Spotify and iTunes. Please like and subscribe if you like what we've had to say today.